Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. Our core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Scott Forsgren. Scott Forsgren is a health coach, blogger, podcaster, health writer, and advocate. He is the editor and founder of BetterHealthGuy.com, where he shares his 24-year journey through the world of Lyme disease, mold illness, and the myriad of factors that chronic illness often entails. His podcast, Better Health Guy blogcast, interviews many of the leaders in the field and is available on his website, BetterHealthGuy.com, and on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. He's been interviewed on numerous podcasts and has lectured on his recovery from chronic illness at conferences and on several online summits. He's written for the Townsend Letter and other publications. He is the co-founder of the Forum of Integrative Medicine, which hosts an annual conference bringing together some of the top integrative practitioners to share practical tools for treating complex chronic illness. He serves on the board of directors of Limelight Foundation, which provides treatment grants to children and young adults recovering from Lyme disease. Today, Scott is grateful for his current state of health and all that he has learned on his life-changing journey. Scott, it's truly a pleasure to chat with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karlfeldt. It's great to be here with both you and your amazing accent.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, I worked hard on it. It's taken years to get it to this point. So you've had quite a journey. You've dealt with Lyme and mold illness for many years and shared that experience in several interviews on your website, the BetterHealthGuy.com, for all those people that are interested in it. I mean, it's such a tremendous resource. There's so many incredible interviews that you have on that website. So for anyone that wants to just get smarter about their health in any shape or form, I mean, your website is fantastic. So today, we're going to focus our discussion, will be on detoxification, because that's such an important aspect, and also the role that has played in your journey, because you've been fighting with all these different infections, and also your work, with coaching clients. So talk us a little about, why you found detoxification be such a key, because most people, they just go after bugs. They got Lyme, they got mold, so let's kill that. But for you, detoxification was such a key in this process.
Yeah, so I think detoxification is really foundational in recovering from these complex chronic illnesses like Lyme disease, like mold illness, like many other conditions that people today are dealing with. There's been that long discussion around, is it the terrain, is it the germ? I think that it's actually both, but I think that we're not going to long-term really move the needle from a perspective of some of these microbes if we still have a toxic terrain. And so I would say that the rise in chronic illness seems to correlate to the rise in the environmental toxicants in our environment. The more toxic we become, the more hospitable we are as a host for these various microbes. And it's interesting that some microbes are even known to protect us from various toxins. So if we think about parasites or candida, for example, they may be in the body as a protective mechanism to help keep us from the damage that could be caused by various heavy metals. And so a protocol that is intended to address microbes, I think longer term, really needs to have a big focus on detoxification, on drainage. That's why I think of this as a foundational aspect of any recovery process before you start moving into trying to manage or, kill the microbe. I don't think it's about kill, but it is about this detoxification, improving the terrain. And really for me, as part of my ongoing health maintenance program, the focus on detoxification is still at the very top of my list. And I think unless something happens in our world to reduce environmental toxicants, that detoxification really is going to be a daily and lifelong process for those of us that really want to continue to maintain or improve our health over time.
Because a lot of times people tell the story, if you have, fish that are sick, what do you do? I mean, do you just keep throwing food at them, or do you clean, the water? I mean, you make sure the environment is right, and that's so crucial when it comes to detoxification, is creating that proper environment. But then people that are wanting to detoxify, they go to like a health food store and they see a supplement that says, a detox supplement, and they take that and they think that now they're detoxing. But I mean, so what are some of the mistakes that you see people do when it comes to detoxification, and what should they look out for?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is to keep in mind that if we avoid toxicants in the first place, we don't need to detoxify them. So looking at what are all the sources of toxins that we encounter on a daily basis and minimizing those as much as possible. So pure air, pure water, pure food, filtration, eating organically, and then looking at what are we using for cookware, pots and pans, what are we using for personal care products, makeups, cleaning products, not wearing our shoes in the house, for example. It can be a long list, but I think it's important to think about everything that we breathe, we drink, we eat, or we put on our skin. Certainly can be sources of toxins like mercury amalgam fillings or dental materials that we need to think about. So talking with our biological dentist about what that contribution may be to toxicity. And then looking at our environment. I think when we're looking at ways to avoid toxins so that we don't have to detoxify them, for me, the two biggest ones are mold exposure from water-damaged buildings and EMF exposure as well. So if we're looking at those as two primary incoming toxins, how do we mitigate those as much as possible so that we can then not need as much of a focus on detoxification because we're avoiding these things in the first place? And I would say until we address the environment around us, the mold, the EMFs, that the healing journey really doesn't start until we have explored and mitigated those as much as possible. I think another mistake that can be made in the area of detoxification is being too aggressive. I think sometimes we can create problems by being too aggressive with detoxification, that we really need to match the approach to what the person can tolerate. That if we're more aggressive than what the body is able to process, that we potentially can trigger more inflammation, we can trigger mast cell activation. And so with the goal of detoxification being to feel better, not worse, I think sometimes slow and steady and gentle really wins the race here. And so in tying in this kind of aggressive detoxification approaches that many people are drawn to, I think that also brings us to a conversation around sympathetic dominance, type A personalities. If we're always in a fight, flight, or freeze type of mode, we really cannot effectively or efficiently detoxify. So very early in this process, we want to think about ways to calm the limbic system, calm the nervous system, support the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic nervous system, that response that really supports rest, digest, detoxify, and heal. And so I know this is a really critical area for people to be able to get the nervous system into a state that is supportive of detoxification. If we're in that sympathetic dominant mode, we're not going to be detoxifying as well as we should. So things like the DNRS program or dynamic neural retraining system, the Gupta program can be fantastic for supporting the limbic system. Tools like brain tap or frequency-specific microcurrent, all of those can be really supportive of the detoxification process.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize, because the body wants to get rid of toxins. I mean, they don't want to have stuff in the body that is going to impede healthy function. So just by, like what you're saying, the first step, avoiding the toxins. I mean, getting to minimize the the chemicals that you're exposed to, like the shoes inside. I think that's an excellent point. We don't realize how much garbage we bring inside the home just by keeping our shoes on, and also the EMF. That stress, that frequency toxin that we're exposed to continually will continually prevent us from detoxifying, and also, like you're saying, just calming down the nervous system, being more in that relaxed state, then we kick in the normal detoxification. One of the big issues that we are dealing with, you mentioned like amalgam, silver fillings. Also, I know with vaccines, have heavy metals in the vaccines like aluminum and some of the mercury. So do you feel that that's a big issue, these heavy metals that we're exposed to?
I do think that heavy metals are definitely an issue, but I also think that there's things that we need to think about, like mold toxins, the EMFs, the pesticides, the chemicals. I actually would put those higher on my list, and I think that mercury, lead, aluminum, all of those things do need to be detoxified to really optimize our health. But a lot of times, if we can start with broader detoxification and drainage strategies, we are already helping to deal with many of these different types of toxicants initially. And so I don't think we need to get super aggressive or super over-focused on the heavy metals initially. I think later you can get into more targeted tools that can help with heavy metals, but I also think that if you're aggressively dealing with heavy metals, let's say IV chelation, for example, you can trigger mast cell activation. You can trigger more inflammation in the body. The more inflamed we are, the less able we are to detoxify as well. So I think the better strategy initially is to use a broad brush and a broad detoxification strategy, and then become more targeted later if you need that. And so for me, detoxification is daily. It's lifelong. It's not a one-time event or a series of IVs or a seasonal cleanse of some kind. So I do think heavy metals are important, but I think we can start with a very broad strategy that's also going to help with chemicals and pesticides and other toxicants.
Love it. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren. He is the founder of BetterHealthGuy.com. Phenomenal blogcast with a huge amount of information. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren. He is the founder and the host of Better Health Guy blogcast. You can find it at BetterHealthGuy.com. So you were talking about avoiding EMF and also the heavy metals, and the heavy metals comes a little bit later on in detoxification. But a lot of people are talking about then heavy metals kind of intensifying the impact of EMF within an individual. What's your thought of that?
Yeah, I do think that heavy metals can act as an antenna that essentially makes us more likely to be electromagnetically hypersensitive, or to have what's called EHS. And so detoxification of heavy metals can, and I've often seen, help people deal with their EMF sensitivity. I also think that inflammation plays a role here as well. And so Dr. Chris Shade talks a lot about how the more inflamed we are, the less we're able to detoxify. The less we detoxify, the more inflamed we become. So there is an aspect of anti-inflammatory strategies that can also be a helpful tool in this detoxification process, while we are also then working to remove some of the triggers of that inflammation, like mold exposure, for example. The connection between EMFs and detoxification is a significant one. If we are exposed to these EMFs, we are not really efficiently detoxifying. And I've seen this time and time again, that when people really take more aggressive measures to mitigate their EMF exposure, they really sometimes can start detoxifying in a way that they're not ready for. So if they're implementing a Faraday cage, silver lined cloth, for example, in their sleeping location, sometimes they have to do that in a titration type approach rather than just starting right away, because once those EMFs are gone, the body then is finally able to start unloading some of these toxins. And then remembering too that parasympathetic support is really critical. cycle. If we're in this constant fight, flight, or freeze mode, that's also impacting our ability to detoxify. So anything we can do to get into a parasympathetic state, to reduce the EMF exposure, to reduce inflammation will have tremendous value in terms of detoxification.
Yeah, because inflammation it's a sympathetic function within the body, and then the detoxification is a parasympathetic function. So obviously, if you are inflamed, you are then sympathetically driven and you cannot detoxify. So that's why it's so crucial then to work on the inflammation and also work on reducing sympathetic activities like toning your vagus nerve, or do meditation, or things that are calming. And that in itself, like you said, is crucial in order to be able to activate detoxification in the body.
Absolutely.
So then we have the issue, you get detoxification. So then people are thinking about liver. We also have like the four ways out, so to say, colon, kidneys, lungs, skin. But then you need to be able to transport those toxins. So now we're looking at drainage. So what's the difference between detoxification and drainage?
So in my way of thinking about it, detoxification is primarily the use of binders to minimize enterohepatic recirculation of toxins from the gastrointestinal tract. So how do we minimize the reabsorption of toxins that are in the bile as the bile is being recycled? Right out of the gate, we want to make sure that people are not constipated, so they may benefit from things like magnesium or vitamin C, or a product called Parasym Plus from Dr. Diana Driscoll's work that can support the vagus nerve can be great. Some people will do better starting out with single ingredient binders. So if they're more sensitive, things like charcoal or chlorella, zeolite, bentonite clay. There's a product called Supreme Nutrition Takasumi Supreme that I really like a lot. And then there's more complex binders that have several ingredients if the person can tolerate those. And many people can, but there are going to be those more sensitive people that do better isolating ingredients and variables. So I'm a big fan of the microbe formulas products. Their bioactive carbons are really nice. I like them a lot because they don't need to be separated from food and supplements like many other binders, which makes this detoxification sometimes complex from a timing perspective. I wouldn't take them with pharmaceutical medications, but they do make things a little bit more flexible. And then tools like Biobotanical Research GI Detox Plus, or Quicksilver Ultra Binder, or Beyond Balance Toxis Bind. All of these binders, I think, can be tremendously helpful. There are pharmaceutical tools here as well. Things like cholestyramine or Welchol can be fantastic. They're not always tolerated very well. Cholestyramine particularly can be difficult. And then drainage, I think of as supporting the channels of elimination, the emunctories, the drainage pathways. So looking at liver, kidneys, lymphatics, the extracellular matrix, the gut, the lungs, the skin, many of those that you already mentioned. And so in this realm, I tend to think of homeopathic tools, and many of these coming from the German homotoxicology realm, things like the products from Picana or Energetics or DesBio or Physica. There's a number of companies in this realm that have tools to support the channels of elimination, the drainage pathways. I do think that they can be slowly introduced, also not doing things too aggressively. They're generally well tolerated as long as people don't overdo the dosing of these things. And so detoxification really is the binder aspect. Drainage remedies are supporting the inherent detoxification systems that we have within the body. And so that's the differentiation that I generally think of.
Wonderful. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren. He is the creator and the host of BetterHealthGuy.com, where you can find a tremendous amount of information about integrative health aspects, what to do in order to improve your health. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren, and we are discussing lymphatic detoxification and what you can do to feel cleaner, get rid of all that junk that is interfering with your health. So we're talking about a little bit of the difference between the detoxification and drainage. What are some of the other tools that you found helpful for additional drainage support? I mean, you talked about some of the homeopathic, you talked about the binders, for detoxification. So are there some additional tools that you found to be really important?
Yeah, you bet. So I think one thing we want to remember is that glutathione can be helpful, but that the other phase 2 pathways are also important to consider. So particularly with mycotoxins, we're thinking about supporting glucuronidation with things like calcium D-glucarate. That came from the work of Dr. Neil Nathan, Beth O'Hara, Emily Givler. So making sure that we're focusing on supporting many of the phase 2 pathways. I think that trace minerals can be amazing in this realm as well. If we weren't so trace mineral deficient, we probably wouldn't have a lot of this bioaccumulation of toxins that we're experiencing. So incorporating minerals can be fantastic. Many of the minerals are also antagonists to the various metals, so things like zinc and selenium can be helpful. Dr. Deanna Minnick, she talks about ways to do a lot of this using foods, which is a beautiful strategy as well. And then I think that some of the other tools that we can think about are movement, making sure that we're walking or rebounding or doing things to keep the fluid flow moving in the system, the lymphatic system flowing. That's really important. Coffee enemas can be a fantastic tool within the community of people that I work with chronic Lyme disease and mold illness. That's very commonly a tool that people find tremendously helpful. For me personally, it was fantastic for reducing pain and inflammation. Supporting bile flow can be very important as well, making sure that that whole movement of toxins from the liver into the gallbladder and into the intestines, that is working well, that we're creating bile, that we're getting movement of that bile. Some people benefit from things like colon hydrotherapy. Many people, I learned about ionic foot baths from Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, so that's another tool that I personally use and do think can be a helpful gentle way to support detoxification. It's also helping to support that parasympathetic response that we talked about. Castor oil packs can be a fantastic tool. Oil pulling, where you use a healthy oil and swish it around in the mouth, can actually help to reduce some of those lipophilic or fat-soluble toxins as well. Liver gallbladder flushes can be helpful. This is an area, though, that I think people really do need medical supervision. They can be difficult for some people. You want to make sure that you're not getting yourself into any difficult situations, so that's something to talk with your doctor about. Saunas can be very helpful as well, but I do think that it's important to remember that they can stir up toxins within the body as much as they're helping the body to sweat out some of these toxicants. We also potentially have the possibility of mobilizing toxicants internally, and so that's why we want to make sure that when we're doing something like sauna, that we have that foundation of detoxification, drainage, binders, making sure that all of the channels of elimination are well supported, because if someone's not ready for that, it can actually redistribute toxins internally that can be more stressful on the body. So again, trying to find ways to not be too aggressive about this process, in my experience, has been really important. Being myself a recovering type A+ personality that I now am proud to say I'm now a type A- personality, I originally gravitated to a lot of those more aggressive types of interventions. And I think over time, it's become very clear to me that sometimes the body just needs a nudge in the right direction, that we don't need to be too aggressive. And then also thinking about sometimes getting, toxic people, toxic relationships out of our lives can be an important part of this whole process as well. So those are some of the tools that come to mind for additional adjunct interventions in supporting detoxification.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned glutathione, and that's the thing, is that people don't recognize you have the phase 1, phase 2, in that detoxification process, and also even like a phase 3, where you have the lining and intestinal lining, where you kind of clean up that with binders, and that triggers the liver start to dump more toxins into the intestines. So with glutathione, how important is that in detoxification, and what are the best sources of glutathione? I mean, it's a question. If you take it orally, does it even work? How should we only do it IV? How important is it?
Yeah, so I think glutathione can be important. I would say, though, that not everybody that's more sensitive will tolerate it. And so if people have issues with sulfur compounds, onions, garlic, glutathione, those types of things, they may not be able to tolerate it initially. So again, it's probably something to, start slow and low. In my experience, some of the liposomal formulations can be very helpful. A number of companies that have different products, Quicksilver Scientific, Research Nutritionals, those are two of the ones that come to mind that I think can be very helpful tools. There is certainly a place in people collaborating with their doctor to consider things like nebulized glutathione or IV glutathione, and those can certainly be helpful. But I would say that since the introduction of some of these liposomal products are available, that sometimes, daily consistent use that you can do at home can really have some very powerful benefits where people may not be as consistent about doing the IVs or other types of nebulized forms of glutathione. And then also some of the precursors like NAC, for example, can be very helpful for supporting the body's ability to create glutathione. Coffee enemas actually have a role in supporting this whole glutathione process as well. So I do think glutathione can be very helpful. It's probably not something to use every day long term. There are some concerns about potentially impacting your body's inherent ability to produce glutathione if you use it long-term every day. So it might be something that's more of a pulsed type strategy. But I think it is very helpful, just also understanding that when we're talking about mold toxins or mycotoxins specifically, that some of the support for glucuronidation, which is another pathway, another phase 2 pathway, that can also be very, very important. The number of mycotoxins that are detoxified through glucuronidation is significantly more than what is detoxified through glutathione conjugation. So I do like glutathione. I think it can be helpful if tolerated, not something to be too aggressive with, and then just making sure that we're not getting too hyper-focused on that one detoxification support.
And also, from my understanding, glutathione is very the recycling of glutathione is very nutrient dependent. So here we come with that we need to then support that with other things like vitamin C, magnesium, B6, zinc, and those type of things to make sure that we can reuse the glutathione. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I think that's a good point, right? You don't want too much of the oxidized glutathione. You want to make sure that you're able to continue to recycle and benefit from that. So absolutely important to consider.
Yeah, great. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren. He is the host and the creator of BetterHealthGuy.com, a blogcast where you can find cutting-edge information with some of the leading experts throughout the world in the integrative health field. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Scott Forsgren. He is the creator of BetterHealthGuy.com. So we talked a little bit about then the glutathione. Also, you mentioned earlier as we were talking about heavy metals, how important then, as we're getting rid of heavy metals, obviously then we need to put things in its place. And now we're talking about minerals. So how important are minerals in the detoxification, and what functions do they serve in there?
Yeah, so I think the both macro minerals and micro minerals or trace minerals are very important, particularly in understanding that a lot of the bioaccumulation of these toxins results from not having adequate minerals. Our soils, our foods are largely depleted as compared to many years ago, and that can lead to a bioaccumulation of toxic metals. I like to use both macro minerals like zinc, Silica is actually another one that I use for dealing with aluminum. Selenium can be helpful, but then the trace minerals are really critical. So you're looking here at products that have, 70 plus different trace minerals. There are things like the Quinton isotonic is fantastic. The concentrates, bioactive carbon minerals from microbe formulas is another. There's a lot of tools in this realm, but I think it's important that we're repleting these minerals as much as possible so that the body doesn't have a need to hold on to a lot of the toxic metals and that we're not bioaccumulating these things. So I would think of if we look at detoxification and drainage as a foundational aspect of a chronic illness recovery program, I would look at implementation of some of these trace minerals and some of the macro minerals as a foundation of the detoxification process itself.
Because what people don't recognize is that the body is continually remaking tissue and remaking enzymes, and while it's doing that, it needs material, and enzyme or minerals are obviously part of that process as a building block in creating the tissue, creating the enzymes, and so forth. And if we are then lacking in these nutrients, then the body's going to grab the next best thing. So it's going to grab then mercury or cadmium, in place of zinc, or in place of, or lead in place of calcium, or whatever it may be. Because it needs to remake the tissue. So then it's going to grab whatever is available, and we have lots of heavy metals around us. So if we continually replete ourselves with the minerals, then we don't have that need to kind of bring in heavy metals and hold on heavy metals in our tissue that in the long run obviously are very detrimental and can trigger immune system reactions and can put a lot of stress on the body that we can't even know of.
Absolutely agree.
So once you've supported this detoxification and drainage, so you need to find then kind of more specific interventions, and you're talking about things like mold, pesticides, metals. I mean, do you have to? You've done this kind of general brush, and you want to start low and slow, so you don't overdo. You want to be a type A minus versus type A plus person. I love that. Yeah, you got to cruise at a 91%. Yeah, don't do the extracurricular activities. So what are some of the kind of more specific interventions that an individual can do at that time? Is now the time to do that, or should you wait even further?
Well, I think that the detoxification and drainage strategies that are broad brushes, that are more broad in terms of what they're helping the body to support, can go on for quite a long time and can get people very far down the path. Some people may be fine just doing some of those broader things that we talked about. But if someone is dealing with a specific toxicant where they need more support, I think this is an area where we can turn to things like herbs or homeopathy, and those can really shine. And so with mold toxins, for example, I love an herbal product from Beyond Balance called Pro Myco. I love some of the homeopathics like Mycocancord from Energetics or mycotoxin inhibitor from Professional Formulas. If we look at things like glyphosate, some of these pesticides, Des Bio has a fantastic product called Addy Cleanse. Energetics has one called AgriCord. There's the Matrix Minerals product from BioPure, or the Toxins PST product from Beyond Balance. So lots of tools that are a little more focused, a little more specifically designed to support specific types of toxicants. When we get into the heavy metal realm, there's things like Metal Cord from Energetics, lots of things that we can do to get a little more specific when we're working with heavy metals. There's things like ALU or ALU Tox from BioPure that can be helpful in dealing with some of the aluminum toxicity. Silica we talked about as well. So I think slow and steady and gentle really wins the race here. And then for many toxins, we can also think about some of the lipid replacement or replenishment type protocols. So the Patricia Kane work with phosphatidylcholine, with butyrate, with some of the other tools. Glutathione actually is one that she uses. And so that's getting at more of a deeper detoxification of intracellular toxins, or what may even be termed DNA adducts, where we actually have some of these toxins inside our cells that are negatively impacting our mitochondria. And so that can be a really nice strategy. You can actually start fairly early by implementing some of the lipid replacement orally, and then later you can do IV interventions that are a little more intense, probably not the place to start, but that can really help getting at some of those deeper intracellular mitochondrial impacting toxins as well.
Yeah, because what people don't realize the membranes, how important they are around the cell, around also the mitochondria. You also have, obviously intestinal lining. You have, it's all these different membranes that you're dealing with, and that's where toxins are transported out from, and then nutrients are entered into. So, and then here you have all these different heavy metals and chemicals that can kind of lodged into that membrane. So by adding phospholipids, like phosphatidylcholine and other types like that, you are then able to then heal these membranes and then start to knock out these different heavy metals and chemicals that are then locked into these membranes. And that in itself is a really powerful detoxification tool to do.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And that's why I think it's something that, similar to dealing with biofilms, which is a whole nother conversation, I think these deeper detoxification strategies are really good later in the process once you've cleaned up as much as you possibly can so that you're ready to be able to tolerate some of the tools like the Patricia Kane work, similar to in the microbial realm when we're dealing with some of the microbes, which we obviously need to do in conditions like chronic Lyme as well. This foundation of detoxification and drainage, it's kind of analogous to the idea of dealing with biofilms, that generally you want to do as much as you can with some of the free-floating microbes before you start really getting in and breaking down some of these biofilms, because again, when you get too aggressive, whether it's with aggressively supporting detoxification or breaking down biofilms and aggressively supporting microbes, you're going to trigger a lot of those mast cell, histamine, inflammation type scenarios that then will make this whole detoxification process really slow down. So important to keep that slow and steady mantra in mind as we move through this detoxification process.
And just for our listeners, so what are some of the symptoms that they can experience if they're going too fast, so they know, oh, darn it, I'm going too fast, I got to slow down?
I would say that it's going to overlap a lot, unfortunately, with symptoms they're already experiencing. So if we look at symptoms of chronic Lyme or of mold illness or of heavy metals, there's already tremendous overlap. But I would say common scenarios that people will see with these detoxification reactions could be headaches, could be fatigue. So as the body's trying to process what's happening, it can become very fatigued. Sometimes skin presentation. So if the body's not able to keep up with the detoxification, the skin is often kind of the last ditch effort to detoxify. So you could have breakouts or skin rashes, things of that nature. And they commonly overlap a lot with what many people may know as Herxheimer reactions, which really are generally more related to microbial interventions, but the detoxification type reactions will look very similar. But I would think about headaches, fatigue, skin type reactions as some of the top things that could occur if the detoxification support is a little too aggressive.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a bunch of different tools like the sauna, colonics, coffee enemas. Are there some other tools that people can kind of lean on to get the toxins out of the body?
Yeah, I think we covered quite a few of them. So colon hydrotherapy, coffee enemas, the ionic foot baths, the castor oil packs. I think castor oil packs are really underutilized and can be fantastic, and it doesn't have to be too complicated. I mean, you can actually get a roll-on castor oil, just get an old T-shirt, roll it on, tuck in your shirt, and, go to sleep and let the heat of your body actually help deal with the castor oil is one strategy. I tend to enjoy doing that a little more in hotels than when I'm at home, but but that's one strategy that you can certainly do. And then we talked a little about the liver gallbladder flushes. I do think those are on the more aggressive side. Same with sauna. So obviously those are things you want to do with your medical provider. Rebounding, like just getting a mini trampoline and just getting some vibration or a vibrational trainer where you're getting some of that vibration to support the movement of the lymphatic system can be great. And then probably the easiest and most overlooked is just walking. So walking is probably one of the best tools for keeping the lymphatic system moving. The lymphatic system does not have a pump, and so we need to keep the lymphatic system moving to be able to move these toxins through the body and ultimately out of the body. So I would say sometimes the simpler things are actually at the top of the list in terms of effective tools, and just getting some movement, some walking within your ability can be very, very supportive of this detoxification and drainage process.
Yeah, exactly. You got to move. Lymph doesn't move by itself. You got to move it. So you got to walk. Vibrational rebounding. All of that is key. So any kind of resources that people that because you're in touch with so many people, through your blogcast. I mean, just like I get the benefit of really interviewing some amazing people like yourself on my radio show. I mean, you're doing the same on the blog, your blogcast, Better Health Guy. So any kind of resources that you think it's important for people to be able to have access to and utilize?
Yeah, so I think the podcast that you talked about is a fantastic tool. Super blessed to be able to interview lots of amazing people. I think if we're talking about the realm of mold as a contributor to toxicity, the International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness, or ISEAI.org, is a fantastic resource of practitioners that work in the realm of biotoxin illnesses, mold, chronic Lyme disease, and so I would encourage people to explore the ICI.org site. And then the Forum for Integrative Medicine for practitioners that are listening, that's an organization that I co-founded where we bring a lot of brilliant practitioners together. We're doing it in March of 2020 as an online virtual event and having an opportunity to learn from some of the best and brightest. And so if people are interested in that, it's forumforintegrativemedicine.org.
Wonderful. Well, Scott, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm always so grateful for all the up-to-date, cutting-edge information that you bring to your listeners and all the other forums that you're a part of. Thank you so much for coming on to my show today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karlfeldt. It was an honor.
Thank you. That is it for today. You're listening to Health Made Radio. Remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. 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 Health is what you make it.